Hi there, thanks so much for joining me for today's Drawing for Adults class brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library and the Ann Arbor Art Center. Today we're going to be creating these really fun fall festive still life paintings. So we're going to be doing these in watercolor paint. So the first thing we need to do is simply sketch out our design on our piece of watercolor paper, just in pencil. You can really be flexible with what you want to do here. If you want to grab some gourds, pumpkins, leaves, different things from your front porch, backyard, whatever you have, or of course just do a quick Google image, you could always do that for inspiration. So you can keep the design simple, or you can add lots of different objects in your still life. It's really however you want to do it, and I recommend, especially if you're new to watercolor and still life drawing, then just to keep it simple. So notice I erased a lot of my pencil lines before I started. Watercolor paint is really transparent, so whatever you paint or whatever you draw underneath that paint, it will show through. So the other thing that I would mention is to be patient with this process, because watercolor painting is really best done with lots of layers, especially this particular project. So we might have several times where if you're doing this like on your own with actual paints that you'll have drying time. I'm doing this digitally so I can just kind of run through this really quickly, but you might have to wait, 10, 15, even 30 minutes depending on how much you flood your paper with water. So I would recommend doing a lot of wet on wet techniques here, where you're putting the wet paintbrush with just water on your paper first and then putting wet paint on top of that, so that you let that paint just kind of bleed and go where you want. But sometimes if you need a little bit more control, then you're going to want to put wet paint on dry paper. So make sure that your paper isn't wet, and that's when we would need it for it to dry, of course, before you put on a bunch of color. And notice I'm using a lot of the same colors. I'm really mostly sticking here with some a warm color palette, both for my leaves and for my pumpkin. And so this is just gonna I'm adding here some little splatters of paint, or you can just lightly tap your brush once it has some paint on the end there and let it kind of flick and splatter a little bit. Obviously be careful, you don't want to make a giant mess here. Again, much easier to do digitally, but hopefully you get the general idea. Watercolor paint, I will say, digitally is not nearly as fun nor as interesting looking, I think, so I'm really excited to see we're excited for you all to be able to do this with actual paint. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson and that you'll have fun painting.